The battles between the Titans and the AEUG have been chaotic. Each time that the Titans seem to lose ground, they managed to gain it in another realm. Though they lost both Jaburo and the Kilimanjaro base, they gained a major acquisition. At this point in the story, the Federation has named Jamitov Hyman the head of the Federation forces, giving the Titans access to the biggest military in the solar system. Plus, they've turned Gryps into a military stronghold in space, and Captain Scirocco has capitalized on Char Aznavour's temper to secure alliances with Axis Zeon. As for the Karaba AEUG alliance, though they managed to secure Kilimanjaro, they did so at the cost of morale. Their ace pilot, Camille Bidon, now deals with a rival, quote-unquote, that now has a new mobile suit, not like it helped him before, but he also finds himself demoralized, as his faith in his commanding officer is waning, and he has lost the love of his life. Char Aznavour's mistakes continue to cost the AEUG dearly as good soldiers and potential alliances slip through his fingers while Scirocco reaps the benefits. It's at this point that the war reaches its final stanza. What can the AEUG do to put the Titans on the back foot? Can Char redeem himself from his most recent mistakes? Can Jared actually want to fight? Well, I think it's time we find out. At this point, Jared is on the hunt for Karaba and sees that they're moving towards Africa. He susses out that they're likely headed for Dakar, which is a correct assumption. Over with Char, Hayato catches him checking in on the Hyakushiki, but reminds him that he won't be piloting for the next operation. Whatever it is that they have planned, Char is key to it. As for Camille, Amuro checks in on him. The two discuss the nature of the war they're in, and whether or not people are going to learn from what's going on. There's also some tension with Char and Amuro, go figure, and Amuro's issues seem to stem from Char's inability to pull the trigger on leadership, and his role in all of this. On the ground, Beltorchka is working undercover at a base in the Dakar area. She's posing as a reporter, but she gets denied clearance to a new area by the Feddies, and one of them, well, cops a feel for fun. A Titans officer comes in and intervenes, causing the men to back down after a short scuffle. They have a short conversation, but there's not much to mention about this lieutenant. The dude seems to be all in on Titans propaganda. Back with the Aldumla, it's time for a fight. Camille and Amuro have taken off over Dakar, and Jared mentions that they are low on defenses in that area. This, of course, is kind of weird considering that this is where the Federation Assembly is at right now. Even so, the Federation mobilizes a squad of Ashimars to counter the AEUG and Karaba in the air. Away from the combat, Amuro hands off Char to Beltorchka, then heads back into the fight. Apparently this whole thing has been orchestrated by Luyo and company, putting Char in front of the Federation Assembly in a Hail Mary to attempt to sway public opinion. It's here that Char gives his famous Dakar speech, as the AEUG take control of the chamber. Now, we can't really play the whole speech because it would probably get flagged for copyright, but it goes without saying that this is Char's finest moment. Everyone tunes into this speech, even Char's sister. Yeah, we get a Salem Ass cameo. Effectively, what the speech is about is the message that Char's father had put out there so many years ago. Humanity, as a whole, shouldn't restrict itself to repeating its same mistakes over and over again, and that the Earth flat out cannot handle the stress that humanity and those mistakes, wars, keep putting on it. Souls that are weighed down by gravity just keep the cycle going, and the Titans are a perfect example of that. In an attempt to counter the evils of the Zombies and their military, the Federation just made another zombie family to substitute it. Basically, humanity needs to keep branching out into space and leave all this nonsense behind, lest we become the architects of our own destruction. While this speech is going on, Jared mobilizes in his new mobile suit. This is the RX-160 Byerland. The RX-160 Byerland, as of this episode, is now completed. As you can tell by the MS designation, this comes from the same development line as the Gundam Mark II and the Hazel series of Gundams. See? Hazel mentioned. There you go. I didn't forget they exist. I will do a video on them at some point. Anyway, the Byerland is an experimental unit that was meant to have self-sustained atmospheric flight, so it could benefit from air superiority without the need for a base jabber or a transformation gimmick. Now, how does it do this? Massive thrusters. Yeah, just look at the back of this thing. It's got a giant gaping butthole. Well, at least it's not on his face like another mobile suit that I've made fun of in the past. But yes, this thing flies via the power of thermonuclear farting, for the lack of a less funny term. Also, it's appropriate that Jared has a gaping anus mobile suit, considering how many times he's had his shit pushed in during the show. Oh, God. Anyway, the Byerland, I can't believe I wrote this shit. Stands 23 meters tall and uses Gundarium alloy armor, Natch. It has 2 beam sabers, 1 on each arm, and 2 megaparticle cannons, 1 on each arm. As much as I make jokes about it, this is a very lethal mobile suit that is basically a Gundam in all but name. It is incredibly versatile, and if you've seen Gundam Unicorn, a Byrlant is deadly if it's in the hands of anyone not named Jared Mesa. At this point, Camille just wants to play keep away so as not to cause any collateral damage over the city of Dakar, but the Titans don't give a shit. Camille ends up shooting a guy down, and then saves him and his buddy from crashing into the ground, telling the men to listen to the broadcast so they know exactly what's going on. During the battle, Amuro also catches that Jared is headed for the comms building. Beltorchka, during this whole thing, gets a good idea that she should catch the fight on camera and show how little the Titans give a shit to the whole world. During the course of this, the Titans' recklessness is shown for the whole assembly and for anyone that watches the broadcast, and during his speech, Char makes more than enough time to point out exactly what's going on here, and how insane these guys are. On top of that, the Titans lieutenant from earlier is moved by Char's speech, and actually stops the mobile suit from taking out the comm center. At this point, Camille gets cornered by Jared, because he made a rookie mistake, but the lieutenant from earlier confronts Jared over his actions. And then Jared opens fire, firing straight through the donut, and then hitting the assembly. Yeah, Jared quite literally, with one shot from a megaparticle cannon, just fucked the entire Titans because he wouldn't calm the fuck down. On the tally for Jared versus Camille, we can't really add this because there wasn't much of a direct fight, but we're going to anyway because this is a massive L. He just fucked the entire faction. At this point, the Titans are now on the shit list of the Federation bigwigs, and the AEUG was just gifted a massive win by this pompous dipshit. Oh god, I love it. Anyway, Char's not really feeling it after this whole thing is over, despite the win. He feels like he's given up his freedom just to do the right thing. During a conversation with Amuro, Char asks if he's a human sacrifice of sorts, to which Amuro makes jokes about. Here's the thing, let's just say this conversation is more important than you realize. We'll get to it later, but keep in mind Char's facial expressions and what they're drinking. Yeah. Either way, the AEUG have turned the tide in a big way. Now, is humanity going to move beyond the things that led to this point just yet? Probably not, but things just got a little bit better. Afterwards, Jared once again catches up with the Aldumla, but Quattro and Camille are loading up their mobile suits to head back to space. What they know at this point is that they need to follow up fast from this win. Life lesson, folks, you can't just take a W and just sit on it. You have to keep the momentum up. As it stands, Amuro and Beltorchka are staying on Earth to keep up the fight there. Amuro and Char begin to say their goodbyes, but the enemy catches up. Amuro then hops in the Deja, and Camille wants to help, but Char nixes the idea. While the shuttle prepares to launch, Amuro and his men engage the Titans. Jared, who for some reason is on a base jabber, gets desperate to draw out Camille and orders his ship to ram the Aldumla. Yeah, brilliant idea, dummy. Anyway, they refuse because they have some sense and they just start firing missiles. At this point, Amuro moves in to take out the enemy Garda class, and it goes exactly how you'd expect. He sends it careening to the ground. Then he moves in to keep Jared's attention. It doesn't quite work out, but Jared fucks up and gets caught in a tailspin, then shot by Amuro on the way down just to rub it in. Lol. Anyway, the shuttle busts through the atmosphere, heads back into space, but they don't get much of a break. The Argama is already in combat by the time that they get into space, and it's a hellacious fight. Yazan and his flunkies are putting the pressure on, and both Char and Camille feel that pressure, and they want to get in there and help. On the ship, Fa wants to help as well, but Bright is not letting her launch. Then, the kids get into the Methus and start causing havoc. At this point, Bright tells Fa to give the kids a spanking, basically telling her she's clear to fight. With the Titan's vessel, we see the unfortunate reality of Char's mistakes. Ensign Rekoa is now a Titan. They don't trust her, as you would imagine that they wouldn't. Yazan's team then redeploy after a refit and capture one of the Rick Diaz units, then slaughter it, killing a new character named Batch just as soon as he shows up, and leaving Apolly alone to fight them. Fa manages to get in there to try and help out, and both Camille and Char launch from their shuttle. As you'd imagine, Fa's not able to do much outside of, well, delay the inevitable, and she ejects from the damaged Methus. Camille and Char engage, and Char then calls for the Mega Launcher. Yazan tries to intercept, but fails, and Char pinpoints the enemy ship, which is the Alexandria, to try and take it out. However, Camille's new type sense goes off and senses Reccoa, along with Reccoa sensing not only Camille and Char, but that weapon has hit the field. The Alexandria listens to what she tells them, and falls back immediately. Char fires, misses the Alexandria, but he does manage to hit one of Yazan's boys. Doesn't kill him, but it's nice to see them suffer. Reccoa afterwards can't really properly explain what happened, and after trying to leave the bridge, she gets cabadoned by Ramses, who thinks that she's there either to assassinate Scirocco or fuck him. She doesn't deny the latter of the two. On the Argama, Bright welcomes Char and Camille back into the fold and lets them know that the Dakar speech even made it out into space. Bright tells Char he's proud of him, and overall, it's a pretty heartwarming reunion. At this point, we see that Gryps has been divided into two parts. The first is the old fortress of Abawaku, now called the Gate of Zidane, along with Luna 2, which many of you remember as the asteroid base outside Side 7 from the original Gundam series. This is where their military power in space resides. We overhear conversation between Jamitov and Bask Ohm looking to use something called the colony laser, and Bask is worried that the mandate of the Titans being in charge could be revoked. There's also obvious distrust between Bask and Scirocco, so he offers to head out on the next large-scale mission with the Dogos gear. As for Scirocco, he hears Bask is looking to start a squad of cyber new types, but they just don't have the numbers for it. He remarks on the possibility of them using Reccoa, but dismisses it. He then takes the assignment of protecting the Gate of Zidane without much issue, and happily, quote-unquote, relinquishes the Dogos gear to Bask and warns him about the Argama. Bask ego-checks Scirocco, then leaves. Much as I hate Bask, it's not like the guy's wrong here. Somewhere in the colonies, we see a familiar purple-haired woman that we haven't seen in a while. Remember Rosamia? Well, here she is. And no, it's not a coincidence that a Titan's cyber new type is in the same colony that Camille, Emma, and Fa are visiting. Emma has a mission on the colony, whereas Camille and Fa are taking a break with the kids from the ship. The one thing that's pretty neat about this is we actually get insight into colony life and the agricultural modules. And, oh shit, there's a bunch of Hyzaks here. Anyway, when Rosamia sees Camille, she starts calling him brother, and catches up to Camille, Fa, and the kids when they're hopping onto a horse-drawn cart. As you can imagine, Camille is very confused. However, Rosamia is at least polite. Also, they're sheep! And Rosamia has a photo of her and Camille as kids, which, as you'd imagine, is bullshit. Outside of the colony, we have Char heading out on a patrol in the Yakushiki, noting that several AEUG suits have disappeared in the area, which leads the Titans to respond. They open fire the instant that Char moves away from the colony, and the fight's on. This mobile suit, by the way, is the Hyzak Custom. The RMS-01CS Hyzak Custom is, well, a Hyzak. Difference between this and the normal one is that this one is more kitted out for sniping. Its mono eye is changed to a high precision version, and there's also improved heat dissipation in the head. The armor is switched to Gundarium alloy, and has better thrusters and a backpack. It still remained compatible with other Hyzak weaponry, but used a much larger shoulder shield, a beam saber, and a sniper beam launcher, plus could be fitted with 2 triple missile pods. Something of note here is that Char mentions that this is neutral territory they're in, giving an idea to both the Titans' desperation and just how much of shitheels they are. During the battle, the Titans blow a hole in the colony and escape into it, opening fire from inside the colony to the outside as well. Char comes in and drops one of them and then seals the hole left by the explosion. As for Camille and Rosamia, they meet a certain red-haired child that the kids play with and have fun with. And yeah, that's exactly who you think it is, and here comes Haman. The interesting thing about all of this is I don't think anyone in this situation realizes how many dangerous factors are here or the gravity of the situation until Camille spots Haman and Minerva. Haman assumes the worst, that the AEUG is there to kidnap the princess. A Gaza pops out of its cover and then opens fire on Char. Now, Char manages to disable the other Hyzak Custom, but the Gaza opens fire in the colony as well, and then blows another hole in it. To which Char responds with a lethal shot on the mobile suit. Camille and company manage to get inside a shelter while Char works to seal things up. Afterwards, Camille lets Char know that Haman and Minerva are on the colony right now before Char meets with colony representatives to discuss what happened with him. As you'd imagine, Emma and Char get a funky feeling from Rosamia. The next day, Rosami is playing with the kids, but gets weirded out when she's introduced to Emma, showing obvious signs of cyber new type reprogramming. Now at this point, we find out what happened with Gryps 2 and this colony laser they mentioned earlier. They took all of Gryps 2 and turned it into a giant beam weapon. Yeah. So during the meeting, Rosamia wanders in and then apologizes, with Char suggesting that she get examined by the doctor, and Camille rightfully thinks that she's a cyber new type as well. But for some reason, he thought Char had suggested it. Either way, Rosamia ain't right in the head. Over with Scirocco, he's working his magic on Reccoa, and as you can imagine, he be creeping again. What makes it terrible is that it works, but that's his ability as a new type. He then gives the Masala to Reccoa for use, as he takes something called the Pallas Athene to the Jupitress. More on that later. The AEUG sends out a recon team of Camille, Emma, and Apolly, and Basque sends out a team of Barzums with Ensign Reccoa. Reccoa then spots the AEUG team and pushes past her initial hesitations to let the team that she's with know that the AEUG is here. Thus, the battle commences. During the scuffle, Emma gets her hands on the Masala, and to her absolute shock, she hears Reccoa telling her to get off. On the Argama, Rosamia is in the hangar, shaking, thinking she needs to get into a mobile suit for some reason, but Fa keeps her from going out. Now at this point, Camille gets into a fight with the Masala, thinking that it's Sarah Zabirov that's piloting it, up until he lops off one of the arms and hears Reccoa's voice. He pursues it as it flees, ramming it into debris, and then finally sees it is indeed Reccoa. He goes to talk to her once she gets out of the Masala, and the conversation is about as cold as you'd expect. Camille is in absolute denial and is totally broken up about this. The conversation between the two is heartbreaking because this is Gundam, and you know how this ends, one way inevitably. Someone is going to die. However, she does give Camille one last warning. Gryps 2's colony laser is not only real, but it's completed, and the Argama is in major danger. Also, I haven't mentioned this before, but though there's an English dub for this show, the direction wasn't that great. It was done a very long time ago. If you want to watch this conversation in Japanese, do it. That way you really get the emotional weight of it. Now, the revelation that Reccoa is alive and on the Titans' team obviously has rocked everyone that's a part of the crew of the Argama. During the course of this, Camille gets smacked more than once because he can't think straight. Char and Bright, however, want to keep focus on the scary part. The giant fucking colony laser! Duh! Also, Rosamia is running away from the doctor since he hasn't determined her cyber new type status yet. It goes without saying that morale for the Argama is reaching another low point, and they have a massive fucking gun pointed at their heads. At this point, Basque wants to target the Argama and doesn't give a shit about the colonies of Side 2, only instructing his men to avoid hitting Colony 13, and ordering Reccoa not to leave the bridge. On the Argama, Char's obviously feeling something because it's too quiet. And he's not the only one. Bright notifies people to get to battle stations, and the pilots get to their suits. What happens next is horrifying. They miss the Argama, and blow a massive hole in one of the colonies, with Camille feeling the mass death all the way at the colony that they hit. Colony 18 has 200-meter holes in it now, and this will obviously cause thousands, if not tens of thousands of deaths. The Argama retreats, and Basque considers this a success. After that insanity, they did finally get the chance to get Rosamia to the doctor, but the kids say that the doctor is going to cut up Rosamia? What? He said checkup, you idiots! Anyway, Camille convinces her to get a checkup, and then the kids get bribed with candy. Over with the Titans, Basque tells Reccoa she's being assigned to a chemical weapons team. When she questions the order, she gets belted in the fucking mouth for her troubles. Way to make the right call in switching sides, lady. Also, Basque tells her that they're not a gang. They're not a gang of killers. Here's my response.
You serious?
Regardless, the Masala has been repaired, and they've got a big batch of poison gas ready to drop in a colony. Back with the doctor, we have to put an Ak guy over Rosamia for a minute. Despite what you might think, this scene really isn't sexual. It's more to show that there seems to be a regression with Rosamia. The more we see her, the more childlike she is, to the point where she doesn't even seem to have the public shame of being bare-breasted. As for her health, she seems perfectly fine, but there's more testing needed for signs of hypnosis and also genetic abnormalities. We in the audience already know there are, given that she mentioned them during her time serving under Burgundy Buttmunch, but the Argama doesn't know that. Over with the Titans, there's already issues with the team being able to hold on to the gas chamber, but the colony notices them while it happens, which Rekka was fine with, and they send for help. As you'd expect, the Argama responds. Rosamia and the kids decide to get into a mobile suit, and the doctor has found chemicals inside Rosamia's bloodstream. Char gets out of the Hyakushiki to track her down, and Camille launches along with the Mark II and the Methus with him, with Emma in command. As for the colony itself, Rekkawa is stalling for time and aiming at non-lethal spots on the Nemo suits that are fighting them. On the Argama, Shinta and Kum distract people in the hangar, and Rosamia gets into a Nemo. She manages to figure out the controls and get out, with Char pursuing in the Hyakushiki. Now Char tries to disable her, but she dodges the shots easily, confirming to Char exactly what she is, a cyber new type. As for the Titans, what happens next is horrifying. You see, Rekkawa couldn't delay them enough. The G3 gas is released into the colony, and both Fa and Camille feel the deaths of everyone. Now Camille does manage to hit the tanker, but whether or not it's going to help is completely negligible at this point. Rekkawa and Camille get into it, and Rosamia comes in to back her up along with Char. Camille then descends into the colony with Rosamia, while Char confronts Rekkawa with them fighting. In the colony, it's horrifying, with Rosamia being completely unable to process a dead child being dead. Camille leaps back into the Zeta and fucking unloads on the Titans, annihilating them and taking his time with it. However, at this point, Rosamia points her gun at Camille, saying that the Zeta Gundam will bring the sky down. And at this point, like a winter soldier, she names herself and her rank and flat out says her orders are to destroy the Zeta Gundam. The whole fight becomes a mess at this point. Rekkawa escorts Rosamia away from the battlefield, and everything has gone wrong. Within the course of 2 days, the Titans have committed 2 genocides, and the team's morale sinks even further into the pits. Folks, if this episode seems depressing so far, it gets worse. At this point, Granada's begun evacuating citizens, or sending them into underground shelters, but some refuse to leave in defiance of the Titans. The Argama resupplies at the La Vienne Rose, and the fight continues. At this point, the Doctor gives Char, Emma, Fa, and Camille a briefing on his findings with Rosamia. He found an anti-radiation drug in her bloodstream, alongside a cocktail of other drugs. As you'd imagine, Camille's freaked out. Char says something a bit weird, that if we wait for evolution to take its course, then humanity will bring the Earth to complete devastation. Sounds like he's not completely against the idea of the cyber new type. At this point, the AEUG realizes that they need to get support in the region, specifically that they can help with the people of Side 2, which is where Char will come in handy. With the Titans, Rosamia is taking Psychomu training, and meets her wingman, Lieutenant Gates Kappa. The fleet is currently massing, but the Alexandria isn't able to join them. Now, Bask isn't too happy to hear this, and he pulls the Dogos gear out of the theater, leaving Rosamia behind. At this point, we get to see the new mobile suit developed by the Titans. This is the Bound Dock. The NRX-055 Bound Dock is a massive Titans mobile suit that also functions as a mobile armor. Now, how massive, you ask? Well, it's over 29 meters tall, and weighs over 129 metric tons at max weight. Like the Psycho Gundam, this mobile suit is also equipped with the Psychomu system, meaning that this bad boy is specifically built for use by new types and cyber new types, allowing for a much more responsive performance if you fit that description. Despite its size, it is shockingly swift, sporting 3 rocket thrusters and 4 verniers as well. It has 2 modes, mobile suit and mobile armor, or for the sake of being succinct, Rabbit and Crab. It has a few different weapons as well. For melee, it can use the claws on its legs or one of its arms, or it can also use a beam saber. It also has a beam rifle that can be used in both modes, and a diffused mega particle cannon that can be used in both modes that can target multiple enemy units simultaneously. Or you can charge it for a larger single shot. By the way, the mecha designer of this unit, Makoto Kobayashi, fucking loves this mobile suit. It is his baby. If you ever point a high-grade Bound Dock, show it off on X, tag the man in it, he will comment on your paint job. Both Rosamia and Gates Kappa head out in their respective Bound Docks, and the Argama also launches suits to meet with the AEUG's advanced force. Camille also makes a promise that he might not be able to keep, that he's going to bring back Rosamia. Camille is joined by Char and Emma, headed to rendezvous with a team that Katz is part of. The Titans also deploy with the rest of their suits with the intention of gassing another colony. The fight begins, with Emma drawing first blood in the Super Gundam. At this point, we get a good look at the Titans' G3 teams, and they're planning on gassing several colonies at once. Now, Fa gets into trouble, but is bailed out by Camille going after Rosamia and the Bound Dock. Camille tries to talk her into surrendering, but her brain is all scrambled up. She ends up opening fire, and we see some of the conditioning. They basically hypnotized her into thinking that the Zeta killed her family. Camille takes Rosamia into the colony to take another stab at taking her down. He does have some success at first, given that Rosamia, during the battle, regresses again into a childlike state. In the battle, Char manages to stop one of the G3 canisters, then heads inside Colony 13 after Camille, but for his own reasons. He wants to check and see if Minerva is still there. Inside the house they were in, he finds one of Minerva's handmaidens in rough shape. She reveals that Haman took Minerva away from there, and dies shortly afterwards. With Camille and Rosamia, we see the other Bound Dock come in and start screwing with Rosamia's head. Lieutenant Gates Kappa gets out and holds Camille at gunpoint, but Char flies overhead to give support. Now, Char manages to nail the Grey Bound Dock, and the Psychomu system in it continues to screw with Rosamia, but now they can't control it. At this point, the Bound Dock stands up on her mental command and transforms. Now, Char wants to just destroy it, just solve the problem right now. But Camille tries to talk to Rosamia again, and at this point she's reverted to a different personality, the one that's a soldier. At this point, the fight's back on, but Camille can't take the shot when he needs to. He's afraid of killing her. Thing is, she's not going to stop. Luckily, Char is there to bail Camille out, and they end up retreating. The Bound Dock units follow shortly behind, then retreat when they see the AEUG reinforcements. While the Argama is distracted, Bask is moving the colony laser bit by bit, with the full intention of using that colony laser to annihilate Granada. So far, the Titans' plan has been working. Chairman Melanie of Granada has sent someone to the Argama to try to get some help from Bright and Henkin. At this point, they're asking for the AEUG to try and get Haman Karn on their side again. Now, shockingly, even Char thinks it's worth a shot. During some chat in the hallway, Bright and Camille overhear Kotz talking like he's going to disobey orders, which, as you'd imagine, isn't something Lieutenant Emma's happy about. Basically, Katz is very against trying to cozy up to Axis Zeon, and given he watched the crew of the White Base suffer so much against them, you can understand the perspective. And yes, for those of you who don't remember, Kotz is one of the original war orphans from the original series. Fa is also on the same page as Kotz. Even so, this is a military organization, you can't disobey orders, he sends them both to the brig. Nobody likes the orders from the chairman, but Camille's willing to fly the white flag and go to Haman's ship. Oddly enough, he's the best choice. For those who don't remember the Zeta breakdown, that mobile suit has enough hidden weaponry to be very dangerous, so Camille's as safe as he's gonna get. Even so, he's greeted with soldiers pointing rifles at him, and gives the message to Haman, who is surprisingly amiable this time around. She decides to come to the Argama to personally hear the request from the AEUG. It's at this point that we see one of the most badass mobile suits in all of the Universal Century. One of my favorites. Ladies and gents, Haman Sama's trademark mobile suit, the Cubile. You have to pardon my excitement, I fucking love this thing. The AMX-004 Cubile is an advanced new type mobile suit, one of the pinnacles of Zeon engineering. So much so that several mobile suits after this one will follow its template in one form or another, sporting massive shoulder binders that assist with the AMBAC system and give it crazy mobility in space. On top of hiding the suit's primary thrusters, it goes without saying this is a very quick and very hard to catch mobile suit. The suit stands a little under 20 meters tall and weighs a little under 60 tons at max weight. It also has Gundarium armor, like most mobile suits at the time do. What's interesting about the Cubile is that you can't see any of its weapons at first glance. But once you know about the suit, you spot all of them. You see, the Cubile uses two beam guns, one in each arm, that is mounted inside of the wrist. When need be, these actually can be turned into beam sabers, allowing the suit to have close range options. However, its highlight is what's stored in the tail. Like its pilot, the Cubile has a big butt, but this thing isn't meant to bring boys to the yard. Rather, this tail contains several bit weapons, which are miniaturized versions of the same tech we saw with this mobile suit's predecessor, the Elmeth. Another fun thing about the Cubile is it has two things that set it apart from other Xeon suits. Its eyes. Yeah, this is one of the 2 Xeon mobile suits to have 2 eyes instead of 1 mono eye, provided you don't count the other Cubiles that are developed later. At this point, the Cubile does a flyby of the Argama's bridge, and Char is shocked that the suit actually got completed. Regardless, Haman and her escorts board the Argama, and the conversation reveals that Axis has a condition for aiding the AEUG. The Zabi family are recognized as the ruling family of the space colonies. It's very specific language, but given the sentence that we see next, I actually think that this might be a scriptwriting flub. The AEUG's chairman is apparently willing to accept this, but Char cuts off the discussion and asks a simple question. What would you do if we don't recognize the Zabis as the ruling family? The answer? Axis Xeon will nuke Earth. Horrifying as that sounds, the letter from Chairman Melanie specifies that they'd hand Side 3 over to Axis Xeon if they're willing to take out the colony laser that's pointed at the moon. Haman, being Haman, prods Char a little bit to see what he'll do, considering last time he had the crash out of all crash outs. So she asks Char to ask her properly, in which case he takes off his sunglasses, bows to her, and asks her to disable the colony laser. After seeing this, she agrees, and it looks like, at some point, Side 3 gets to go to Axis Xeon. Side note, even if you're a dub watcher like me, take time to listen to Haman Karn's Seiyu, Yoshiko Sakakibara. Let's just say that she might be perfect casting for Haman. She has this very sultry voice that just fits the character like a glove. Now, if she sounds familiar, and you don't know Zeta Gundam, you'll know her from Hellsing, because she's the voice of Sir Integra, Fairbrook, Wingate's Hellsing. At this point, the combat plan is simple. Coordinate the AEUG with the Guadon and stage a feint. This should create an opening to let Axis do their thing and shatter the colony laser. Even with the option to help, Fa and Kotz aren't willing to do so. The Gundams then launch alongside the Rick Diaz units and get straight to it. However, Char has not deployed in Hyakushiki. He's on the bridge talking to Bright. And they both see that the Guadon seems to be cooperating, but they know the reality of the situation. If, for some reason, Haman decides to turn on the AEUG, at this stage of the war, they're fucked. Emma then gives everyone their marching orders, and the feint attack begins. On board the Guadon, Haman moves to contact Dogos Gear, where Bask has them message Haman and say they appreciate the cooperation, because, keep in mind, they're under the impression that Haman is on their side. Then, they have the Alexandria keep an eye on the Xeon ship. Now what's really going on is that Haman is playing both sides here. Her intention is to disable the colony laser, not destroy it. She fully intends for Xeon at some point to take possession of this weapon. The fighting at this point is furious. So much so that Fa senses it, and takes off out of the detention area. She heads to the bridge, as does Katz, asking to have permission to launch. Bright grants it, and just in time as well, since Camille was struggling with the Titans' numbers advantage. Haman's taking her sweet time, though, keeping the AEUG in a tough position. So much so that the Radish is moving to get into ship-to-ship combat with the Titans. At the last minute, Haman finally fires the Guadon's cannons. Hits Gryps 2 right where it needs to be hit, then retreats. As you'd imagine, Bask is incensed, punching one of his subordinates, because that seems to be his answer to anything, and Haman retreats after having a nice chuckle about how successful things went, because, well, we'll just let Kazuhira Miller tell you.
They played us like a damn fiddle!
The AEUG retreats as well, with this operation buying them some time. Much needed time at that. Now back on the Guadon, Char heads over to talk to Haman and Maneva. Now to obviously dig at Char's ego, Haman says that the AEUG is going to be Lady Maneva's arms and legs, and they're working to revive the Zabis, which, as you can tell by Char's facial expression, does wound him on a couple different levels. Obviously, he fucking hated the aunts and uncles and even the father of this child, but he does care about Maneva. So it just puts him in a weird spot. It's like, fuck, I hate your family, but you're just a kid. You didn't do what they did. I care about you. I want you to have a good life, but you're being played. This woman is puppeting you. At this point, though, the future is in question, but when the AEUG does a flyby, Bright does make sure to get a good scan of the Guadon, telling the crew, don't miss a single turret. Camille then goes to talk to Char aboard the ship, but Emma stops him so that Char can be alone with his thoughts. After all this is done, Jamitov is meeting with Jared to ask him his opinion on Haman. As you can imagine, with Jared, the opinion is not exactly positive, but at this point, he's moving to meet with Haman Karn to see if he can convince her to aid the Titans at the Gate of Zidane instead of continuing to work with the AEUG. Now, the AEUG's aware of this, and Katz voices his concerns, and when he's ignored, he gets pissed. Back with the Titans, we see Reccoa leave Paptimus's room, and I'm surprised that this traitorous harlot is not wiping her mouth as she leaves. Paptimus and Sarah watch the approach of the Guadon to the Gate of Zidane, and tells Sarah that he and Reccoa will be headed to the meeting as well. He wants Sarah to cover them and keep an eye out for enemies. Now it's here that we see the mobile suit that Sarah is probably the most famous for piloting, the Bolonok Saman, which is either pronounced Saman or Samhain. I'm gonna go with Saman. Regardless, the PMX-002 Bolonok Saman was a mobile suit built by Paptimus Scirocco to be a seek and destroy unit. It has advanced surveillance gear built into it, including a ray dome in the head, and also has surveillance equipment in the forearms, but it doesn't have a ton of armament. The suit stands just a hair under 20 meters, and it's a little over 56 tons at max weight. The shoulders of this mobile suit each carry 3 tube rocket launchers, and the other armament is the suit's shield. Doesn't look like much, but it does have a couple different loadouts. One loadout, you can mount a grappling unit and a pincer weapon, and then another loadout, you can mount a beam saber or beam tomahawk that will double as a beam gun. At this point, Sarah has an escort of 2 Hyzacs and disobeys orders immediately. She intends to attack the Argama. Now, on the bridge of the Guadon, Haman tells her crew to be prepared to contact the AEUG. Speaking of which, Sarah managed to get to the AEUG pretty fast, and Camille senses her immediately. Bright does give Camille orders to deploy in the Zeta, and he continues to sense Sarah as he heads out, and then the Titans begin their attack. However, the Hyzacs are way behind the Zeta as far as tech goes, and Camille drops them both without much issue. Sarah then uses the distraction to flank Camille, getting into melee range. Camille at this point tries to talk Sarah down, and does manage to cut the arm off the Saman. In response to the attack, the Argama begins mobile suit deployment with Char staying on the bridge. Camille follows Sarah into a destroyed area to try and talk Sarah down again, and Sarah tries to ambush him on foot. Doesn't go her way though. He tricks her into falling for an empty suit. Nice little trick. He attempts to talk sense into her one more time, which isn't working. Why isn't the obvious truth working?
'Cause she's a woman.
Oh, don't give me that look. You were waiting for me to play that clip. Everybody loves Wu Fei, except for bleeding hearts or women. At this point, Haman's running with the story that the attack on Gryps 2's laser was an accidental weapons discharge of several turrets, all at once, in a precise spot. Lol. Sorry, her smugness just makes me chuckle. I love this character. Anyway, there's really only one person in the Universal Century with a better smug face, but we'll get to him later. Haman meets with Jamitov, who of course opens with threats, but Haman just flat out tells him Axis will annihilate the Gate of Zidane if he tries to kill her and her ship. And it seems like Jamitov has made the same deal that the AEUG did. You know, restoration of the zombie family, you can have side 3, blah, 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 blah. But Haman's like, yeah, fuck you, I just want you dead. Jared takes a shot at her with a hidden gun on his arm, but she dodges it and then pulls off one of her earrings, stating that it's filled with cyanide gas. And just for, you know, a little bit of extra oomph, she tosses it as she leaves the room, but Jared and Jamitov escape into a safe room. The AEUG get the message to start the assault, which they do with gusto. Katz, of course, refuses the story, and Camille has a friend with him. He has Sarah captive in the mobile suit, and instead of heading back to the ship to drop her off, he's ordered to head out to fight. Katz, hearing Sarah, now heads out with Amethyst. At this point, it's an all-out battle at the Gate of Zidane, with the Guadon having the Gaza Seas on standby, instead setting traps for the Titans. At this point, Paptimus is prepared to mobilize his men, but notices Jared's presence on the battlefield. And Jared at this point heads straight for the Guadon with backup from Barzam units, and to his credit, he's actually doing quite well in this fight. However, the AEUG shows up right as he reaches the ship, and Camille makes a beeline right for him. As you'd imagine, Camille starts pushing Jared's shit in again, but gets distracted by a Barzam for all the good it does. Jared attempts to get to the Guadon and actually manages to get a hit in on it. Sarah also tries to help the Titans from the inside of the cockpit as well, which almost gets Camille killed. Sarah tries to tell Katz to attack the AEUG's allies, which finally just drives Camille to grab her face and smack the back of her head up against something hard and knock her out. At this point, Katz manages to get in there, and he tackles Jared instead of listening to the woman. causing decent damage to Jared's mobile suit. Now, at this point, we're not going to count this as a one-on-one fight, because technically it's 2-on-2. But Jared failed again. Afterwards, Sarah gets locked up as a prisoner on the Argama and the Gate of Zedan, and its forces have lost the day. Now, at this point, the Titans are looking to evacuate. They have 1 hour until an empty Axis is going to ram the Gate of Zedan, and that is not a fight that the Gate of Zedan can really win, so the Titans look to empty out the base just to quote-unquote break even, as Bascom says. Jamitov is prepared for them to attack again, which is a wise thing to do, considering that's exactly what the AEUG are planning on doing. They want to keep the Titans' ships from leaving Axis before Axis impacts it and keep the pressure up. As for Scirocco, he's sending Reccoa out to try to rescue Sarah in the Palace Athene. Now, if you didn't notice earlier, Kotz wasn't present in the meeting in regards to future strategy, instead opting to watch Sarah in her room. So Camille and Fa come in for a hand check to make sure that the kid's not polishing a gherkin. In all seriousness, they're pissed, and Katz gets the good old slap. But shockingly, it doesn't shake him out of his mood. Katz agrees to get to the fighting, but God knows the head on his shoulders is just not in it. The AEUG then opens fire on the Titans. Titans return fire. Titans also want to get Jamitov onto the Dogos gear as soon as they can. Mobile suits from the AEUG end up launching, with Emma and Char leading the fight. Katz heads out in the G-Defensor, with Camille behind him in the Zeta. With the Titans, they hear Rosamia and Gates wish to join the combat, but they're held in reserve. The Dogos gear then heads out once they have Jamitov on board, and the AEUG specifically starts targeting ships from the Titans. Axis also sends out its Gaza Seas. At this point, we finally get to see the Palace Athene. This thing's been hinted at for a while, we finally get to break it down. The PMX-001 Palace Athene is the personal mobile suit of Ensign Reccoa Landa, with this suit serving as a heavy attack suit with quite a bit of armament. It stands a massive 27.4 meters tall and weighs over 90 tons when fully armed. Like other suits, Gundanium armor, Natch, and sports 15 Vernier thrusters. Goes without saying, it's size-wise, this is a beast of a mobile suit, but the drawback is it's not that maneuverable. When it comes to armament, it has 2 mega beam cannons, one on each arm. There's a scatter beam cannon on each shoulder. It can carry a total of 8 large missiles on its backpack. It has a twin hidden beam rifle with a mounted grenade launcher, plus a shield that has 2 beam sabers that are hidden behind it. The shield also has small missiles on it, and the feet of the suit can transform into claws to be used in close quarters as well. During the operation, the Argama spots a mobile suit behind them, but with everyone deployed, there's no one to cover the ship. Camille senses Reccoa and tries to new-type tell her to stop. She recoils from it, but she does still fire, just not hitting the Argama that hard. Fa then moves to intercept, but struggles with the much more powerful suit. At this point, the Chaos allows Sarah to escape in the Saman, which Katz senses almost immediately. The idiot gets into the field of fire, and then Char sends Emma after Katz. During the fight, Fa grabs the Palace Athene and starts steering it towards Titan's suits, which forces Reccoa to shoot them down. Then, both suits ram into the Gate of Zedan. The Methis takes the brunt of it, but both pilots end up leaving their suits, with Fa confronting Reccoa. The conversation between the two is easy to sum up. Reccoa is a selfish bitch. No, seriously. Apparently being around the Titans is putting her in touch with her emotions. Does it make sense? No, but here's the thing. It's not supposed to. You have to keep something in mind here. First, Reccoa is indulging in her feelings because she thinks that Scirocco is the first person, the first male in her life to actually appreciate her. Does he actually appreciate her? Fuck no, she's a tool to him. You have to keep in mind that Scirocco effectively is able to hypnotize people with his new type abilities. He specifically targets women, and if you watch closely, you'll see every woman he interacts with becomes infatuated with him. Just in general. Like, keep in mind, earlier on, the first time that she met him, it wasn't a positive meeting, and yet she was seeing visions of him afterwards. At that point, when a woman's hypnotized by Scirocco, they're stuck, and they're willing to throw away any chance at a better life to just become his puppets. So basically, when you hear Reccoa talk, imagine a set of marionette strings above her, manipulating her. During the conversation, Camille lands inside the Gate of Zedan, and Reccoa moves to her mobile suit, with Fa being unable to bring herself to shoot her. Now, at this point, Katz also tries to use Talk No Jutsu, but it's not very effective. Then Emma comes in and basically says, dude, just shoot her. Love might be able to bloom on a battlefield, folks, but Lord knows, it's really fucking obnoxious if you're trying to actually win a fight. Oh, Jared's here too. And he spots the Zeta while it tangos with Reccoa. So, Fa comes in to grapple with Jared, while the Rick Diaz team comes in to try to aid them. However, In an attempt to save Fa's life, Jared shoots down Apolly, who was caught in the crossfire. At this point, Camille goes berserk, and Jared runs away because of it, because it's Jared. Axis begins to close on the Gate of Zidane, and the ships of the AEUG alongside its mobile suits are told to disengage. Jared and Camille still tango, but what's about to happen causes everyone to start separating. At this point, Axis crashes into the Gate of Zidane, and it wins the crash big time. It scatters debris everywhere, starts dropping mobile suits left and right. Emma uses the opening to capture a ship for the AEUG, and we overhear with the Titans that other AEUG pilots are doing the exact same thing, effectively ganking ships to improve the numbers for the AEUG. By the way, Jared and Camille still keep fighting, but Char comes in and breaks it up. Though the battle is considered a win for the AEUG, in this particular case, the loss of Apolly has everyone busted up, on top of having to go toe-to-toe with Reccoa and Sarah. It's a grim reminder that the only place this whole thing is going is heartbreak. At this point, Scirocco is meant to head out and talk with Haman Karn, but there's an argument where Sarah wants to tag along with Reccoa and Paptimus. Between the two brainwashed idiots, there's competition over Paptimus's affections, and they're both acting like 16-year-olds. However, we do see the final mobile suit that Scirocco will pilot in this show. This fat fuck is the O. The PMX-003 fat fuck, the O, is Paptimus Scirocco's personal mobile suit and easily the most powerful. In fact, it's so tuned to his specifications that he's the only one who can pilot it. It has a biosensor system in it like the Zeta Gundam does, which makes it easier for him to pilot as well, considering he can now just use his brain. The tubby bastard even has a substantial power source in it that can power a warship. Because of that, even though it's a fat bastard, it can be surprisingly mobile given it has enough thrusters to make up for the girth. It has 2 subarms in the front skirting that can actually make use of the 4 beam sabers that the mobile suit will carry. And it also has a beam rifle in regards to its weaponry. Also, it's fat.
He's fat!
Now, the real reason Scirocco is being sent out is to use a toxin on the Axis forces, though Jamitov asks for him to delay it. So Scirocco and his team launch their suits anyway. On the Argama, Katz is going stir-crazy and freaks out when he hears news that Scirocco is meeting with Haman. Pilots are put on standby, but Katz tries to launch, and manages to do so despite the AEUG trying to stop him. Camille goes after Katz to stop him from doing something stupid, but as for Scirocco's crew, they'll only let 2 mobile suits on board, so Reccoa volunteers to keep an eye on things in case Jamitov pulls something. On the ship, we see Char and Mineva chatting a bit after she plays the violin for him. Well, that's nice. She does seem genuinely happy to be around him again, but she does let slip that they're moving her to a different ship. Katz transmits that he's another AEUG rep to the ship, and Haman gives him permission to land. Now, on the G-Defensor, we see that Katz is loading his pistol with the full intent of killing Scirocco. Camille also manages to get into the Zeon's flagship, but it fucks things up for everybody because Katz was the only other person that was going to be allowed. Haman even said on the bridge, no Zeta Gundam. So he goes in there anyway, because this is Camille we're talking about, and he has terrible luck. But at this point now, they think that the AEUG is trying to pull something. Regardless, Katz starts his plan with Camille basically spoiling it for the Zeon guards. Katz gets into a fight on the ship, and gets saved by Char. Camille, however, is stuck for now. Now, as for the meeting itself between the Titans and Haman, Jamitov and Paptimus meet face-to-face and Haman joins in. She drops a bomb on the Titans at the start. Her sources say the Federation has looked to drop the Titans wholesale, meaning that the Titans, once again, will only be autonomous, they will have no Federation backing. Scirocco tries to pull his usual political stunts, but Camille senses a murderous intent, which is Scirocco pulling a gun, initially pointing it at Haman. Char then sends Katz away, with Char taking the initiative to go after Haman and Scirocco, opening fire on Zeon guards. His every intent is not just to kill the Titans, but to kill Haman as well. Now Sarah senses this and blasts a hole inside of the Zeon ship. Camille makes chase after Sarah exits her mobile suit, and then Char and Haman escape as well. At this point, we see what Scirocco's true intent was. While Jamitov Hyman is on his knees, Scirocco takes the initiative and executes Jamitov Hyman. Everyone starts scrambling back to their mobile suits, and the remaining Titans blast out of the ship. Camille and Katz pursue them, and a space battle happens between the Titans and the Zeon forces. Paptimus then lies about what happened and orders the Titans fleet to attack. Haman gets into the Cubile, and the AEUG launches all of its mobile suits. Also, I'm sorry, I just love the fact that the Cubile is aura farming, flying with its hands on its hips like that. It's a very Haman thing to do. Anyway, Paptimus and his minions go after Haman, which is a fucking stupid move. She starts ripping them apart, both the Saman and the Pallas Athene, with those bits, and then focuses her attention on Scirocco and the fat ass. Now, Scirocco is able to counter the all-range attack of the bits due to his new type abilities and the biosensor he uses, so both end up gauging how powerful each other's new type abilities are, effectively in a mental battle with one another. They're throwing off so much new type waves that everyone is feeling it as if they have new type abilities themselves. Now, Sarah and Rekkawa are thinking of continuing the fight against Haman while she's distracted, but Kotz comes in with the same idea, but to shoot Scirocco. And then at this point, the kid's worst nightmare happens. Sarah gets in front of the shot from the G-Defensor, hitting her right in the center of the mobile suit, killing her. This is where things get a bit trippy. When Scirocco goes to try and kill Kotz, he sees a projection of Sarah telling him not to attack. I need to explain something about new types later, but later on, just bear with me. Scirocco at this point is interrupted by Rekkawa moving in front of his rifle, and then Camille gets there along with Emma and Fa, plus Char coming from the Zeon Force's direction, which at this point forces Paptimus and Rekkawa to flee. As you can imagine, Katz is beside himself, completely fucked in the head from what just happened. A kid his age, again, he's a teenager at this point, is fully having to grasp how fucked this situation is. And keep in mind, guys, we went over this, I think, in part 2. He wanted to fight, and now he's realizing the weight of it. At this point, the Guadon has taken a ton of damage and blows up. But another Guadon-class ship takes off from Axis in the opposite direction of the battle. The Titans have taken another loss, but once again, the price feels high, with Zeon losing a major ship, and all alliances at this point are gone. At this point, even Shinta and Kun are feeling the pressure of what's going on, not being their normal bratty selves. So Camille is heading out with the loadout of having the Mega Launcher with him, and then also is being deployed with anchor wires, which can actually be used to capture enemy suits. Kotz is also being a little shit, but his launch is being denied in the G-Defensor. He's not a fan of Camille launching by his lonesome, and goes without clearance. Oh, and Fa does the same thing. I think it goes without saying that at this point, military discipline is breaking down. Even so, Bright considers this a distraction so that Operation Maelstrom can succeed. Now, as you can imagine, everything's a mess. Kotz wants to kill Haman, even though at this point he's the one who shot Sarah. It's not Haman's fault that she's dead, but he's just trying to blame somebody at this point. So what does Camille do? Threatens to kill him. Yeah, I'm not kidding. He points a fucking gun at him just to show how serious he is about all of this and having a successful mission. Telling both Fa and Katz to return to the main force. Whole thing is a clusterfuck already. Anyway, the AEUG launches all their mobile suits to try to begin the new operation. The first thing that they're doing is moving to try to destroy Gryps' microwave receiver panel, with Char and Lieutenant Bodhi going to take care of it. The ships begin to open fire as well, and at this point we see that Haman and Zeon are the target of the attack, because remember earlier they intended to try to take the colony laser. Haman also senses someone focusing on her. Now Char is able to pull off his goal rather easily, putting Zeon on the back foot right at the start. The AEUG then has the Zeon forces surrounded, and they maintain their barrage. This is what the operation is. Zeon can't get momentum going, so Haman moves out to get to the Cubile. Now Haman sees that Minerva's out and about on the ship, and she can sense the hostility in the area. Haman then tells Minerva that she shouldn't be concerned, but Haman realizes that Minerva's a new type as well, which is a big revelation to her. The 8th Squadron in the hangar volunteers to help Haman out as she starts boarding the Cubile, and Haman keeps feeling this murderous intent as well, which clearly is putting her on edge. The Cubile launches and Kotz immediately attacks, but Haman states that the pressure she sensed wasn't from him. Fa catches up to Kotz to back him up and distract the Gaza Seas, and then at this point we find out who exactly Haman was sensing. Camille. This fight is one of the better ones in Zeta, and it's considered iconic enough that they actually reduplicated it for the most part in a Dynasty Warriors Gundam game. It's not a long fight, but the power that these two are giving off, once again, is causing everyone around to feel it. It's at this point that Camille and Haman start to sense each other's thoughts, and they have an out-of-body experience. Camille's senses and thoughts are a bit scattered because he's seeing images of all the women that he's cared about during the series, and then starts to sense Haman's feelings. There's a sense of familiarity because he can sense her thoughts drifting out to Char. Effectively, Haman sees the fond memories of Camille and his mom, and Camille senses a fond memory from Haman. when they were investigating Side 3 and posing as a married couple, and she and Char took this famous picture with the two of them. Told you it was going to come up again. Haman and Camille's thoughts seem to join together, and the two start to share thoughts and communicate, but we have to keep in mind Haman's past. She doesn't like people getting close to her after the attempted rape that happened at Axis. So at this point, she lashes out in complete rage, and Camille tries to talk her down, which at this point is not going to happen. She's just seeing red. During the battle, Kotz tries to get into it and kill Haman again, but it doesn't go well, and Haman is able to hack off a chunk of the G-Defensor. Fa tries to get in the way and takes a hard hit to the Methus too. At this point, Camille snaps too, and Haman starts feeling the massive pressure off of the Zeta Gundam. He chucks his beam rifle with the beam saber out like a spear, and then uses the cables on her. So at this point, he's finally able to land a good hit. But he doesn't kill her. He aims just for something else, because while he's moving to take her out, he hears one thought from her mind. Something in her subconscious. So instead, he cuts off a part of the Cubile, damaging the wing binders on one of the arms, and then rendezvous with Kotz and Fa, seeing that they're okay. Camille then moves to help Char and Emma, but the battle is basically won at this point. Zeon forces fall back, with Haman intending to counterattack later. At this point, Haman is convinced that Camille is the biggest threat. The AEUG now have control of the colony laser, and over the last few battles, they have finally managed to not only put the Titans on the back foot, but they've also got Axis there as well. After the fight, Camille tells Char what happened, and Char thinks that Camille might be headed towards the same emptiness that consumed Amuro after the 1-year war. However, at least the kids are here to lighten the mood. And I don't say that ironically. Them actually showing up wanting to play cards, you can't help but smile, because it's one of those things where it's like, God damn it, you could tell Camille really needs this. At this point, though, Axis is headed for Granada, and the AEUG is going to have to try and stop them. Now, at this point, options are limited. If they detonate nukes to try to change course, you irradiate the cities on the moon. They do have the colony laser, but because of Minovsky particle density, they can't get a message through. You have to use the laser transmitter on Axis to actually get a message out. Camille wants in on this operation, but Bright orders him to get some rest. Camille then literally runs into Fa, who also tells him to get some rest, but she gives him a hug and tries to get him to think of life past the war. Thing is, Camille says that he's seeing his purpose in life, but he doesn't go into detail, though it's kind of obvious what he means. At this point, a new machine is unveiled, being piloted by Rosamia, another Psycho Gundam. This is the Psycho Gundam Mark II. The MRX-101 Psycho Gundam Mark II is just as frightening as you'd think. It's fitted with a Psychomu system like the original, and also has a similar mobile fortress mode to the original. The bigger difference between this one and the original is it looks a lot meaner, and it's much more energy efficient. Also, it has a detachable head like the Zeon. Weapons-wise, it has 2 small mega beam cannons in the forehead, 10 beam cannons on the fingers, scatter beam cannons in the abdomen, reflector bits so it can reflect those same beams off and hit more targets, and also has a shield to defend itself as if the big chonker didn't have enough armor. One neat feature that it has is that it can fold its hands in for more concentrated blasts from the beam cannons. At this point, Rosamia is completely under control of the Titans, with Gates Kappa keeping control on her, with her thinking Gates is now her brother. Now, also, Yazan's back. Anyway, the Titans send Rosamia off to try to take out the AEUG and the Zeta. As for the AEUG themselves, they enter Axis's residential district, which is evacuated, but you do see some family photos that look a lot like Rosamia, and she has a brother. But anyway, they're not 100% sure on where the comms building is, so they have to go explore the civilian areas. When trying to rest, Camille starts hearing a voice as Rosamia starts drawing closer. She then starts opening fire, hitting Axis and rattling the civilian district. The Titans are trying to get into communication with Rosamia, but the Minovsky density is a mofo. At this point, they detect there's Titans mobile suits on the way to them, but they're radio silent. Bask Ohm knows it's Scirocco, and he sends Yazan's team to intercept. He also sends out Gates, despite the fact that it could make Rosamia unstable. Camille cannot stay rested, ends up getting into the Zeta to investigate what's going on. Immediately, Camille runs into Rosamia, and the battle begins. The battle's rough. Camille keeps sensing 4 for some reason as he tries to escape. He does manage to get into Axis and trap the Psycho Gundam in a door, and at this point, it can't really do anything, so Camille gets out of the mobile suit to find out who's in the Psycho Gundam. Sure enough, it's exactly one of the people that he thought it was. She fires, he fires back with their handguns, and Camille manages to graze her. Camille keeps calling himself her brother, bringing some confusion and headaches to Rosamia, and also kind of indicating that, yeah, Camille obviously never had a sister, but looks like he actually did want the best for Rosamia. This whole scene is fucking heartbreaking, and we're going to keep going into it. Prepare for pain, guys. Camille, for some reason during this whole process, is also hearing Four's voice. And then they run into an area that's got a bit of a draft, which sends Rosamia into another part of Axis. She's fine, though. While she's walking around in Axis's residential district, she runs into Fa. Camille follows in and keeps seeing Four in place of Rosamia for some reason. Rosamia then opens fire on Fa, hitting a clown for literally the first bit of levity in what seems like forever in this series. Jesus. Tamino was really depressed here. Anyway, the image fades and Rosamia starts to get headaches again. She's so gone that she doesn't recognize a yo-yo as a toy. At this point, Fa starts dressing her down on the whole situation, saying that, again, you can't recognize a toy. You're so fucked. You're so manipulated as a cyber new type that it's a fucking yo-yo, lady! The essence of what Fa is saying, and honestly this is one of Fa's best moments in the series, is she's basically saying, lady, you're a fucking puppet. Rosamia freaks out again, and Gates manages to sense it, which doesn't help since he's in the middle of a fight. Camille and Rosamia head back to their mobile suits, with Camille trying to get her to calm down to no avail. She blows off the Psycho Gundam's leg, and then gets free. At this point, she completely and totally has gone insane. Not just shooting, but shooting everywhere, all at once. Camille is not doing so hot himself, sensing Four again, but also sensing Sarah. Now, at this rate, Axis is going to hit Granada, and Camille is forced to try to engage the Psycho Gundam, try to talk Rosamia down. The Argama takes some hits in the process, and Camille is put in a terrible spot. Four tells Camille to pull the trigger, and he does. He hits a perfect headshot, killing Rosamia and destroying the Psycho Gundam Mark II. Rest in peace. The psychic backlash then causes Lieutenant Gates to lose it and die, opening up an opportunity for Recco Alond to get in close and kill Basque Ohm. Rip Bozo. Now, one good thing does happen with this. The colony laser manages to fire, hitting Axis and deflecting it away from the moon. Torres managed to find the comms facility in the whole mess, and at that point, mission complete. On the ship, Fa and Camille talk about the day's events and the dark conclusion that Camille has come to. New types are only good at taking others' lives. This sentiment clearly disturbs Fa, and when he shares similar sentiments to Char, he's just as disturbed. But honestly, I think that he's disturbed because he knows it's the truth. Oh, and by the way, if you remember the G-Quux video I did about how, new types being able to communicate with one another means that instant peace happens, this scene is what I was thinking of when I said to myself, that's bullshit. At this point, the final battle is here. Argama heads back to Gryps 2, where the Radish and the rest of the AU fleet are trapped between the Titans' forces, now led by Scirocco, and the Axis Zeon forces, led by Haman Karn. The Mega Bazooka launcher gets prepped, and the Argama starts launching everything that they have. After the launch, Jared shocks the shit out of Camille by attacking him while piloting Rosamia's bound dock. Katz and Lieutenant Emma get flanked by Yazan's team, who successfully trap Emma, but Katz is able to save her. Katz and Emma then combine into the Super Gundam, with Katz backing into Yazan right before he does it, which is pretty funny, then chasing Yazan and his core fighter after the merge. Now, he manages to dodge a Saber Slash, and then Emma uses the opening to drop Ramses and kill him. Katz then manages to have some success in dodging, but he makes a rookie mistake. He gets overconfident. He runs into a meteor fragment, damaging the core fighter, and then he's shot by Yazan. Damaged and drifting, Katz's thoughts drift to Sarah, who comforts him. Camille and the rest of the crew sense what's happening to Katz, even the kids in Reccoa. The core fighter detonates, and Katz loses his life. At this point, Emma opens fire on Yazan's team, managing to score a hit on Dunkel Cooper and kill him, and then kills a couple of Barzams while trying to catch Yazan. He sneaks up behind her, but she gets warned by Katz. Yazan scores a hit regardless, immobilizing the Mark II. At this point, the Radish's crew wants to move to save Lieutenant Emma, who is now at a point where the Mark II has one of its arms missing. The Radish blocks the Mark II to try and cover it, with Henkin fully aware of what the cost of this is going to be. Unfortunately, it's a cost that Yazan is more than happy to make Henkin and his crew pay. With a few shots from the Humberbeak, he does catastrophic damage to the Radish. As air starts to escape the ship, we see Henkin badly burned, struggling to stay alive, struggling to say something to Emma, but he perishes nonetheless. Jared, of course, rubs it in with Camille, and the two go at it even harder, and this does not go Jared's way. Jared, in the battle, is knocked towards the Radish after being wounded by the Zeta Gundam, and then the explosion from the Radish kills him. We literally see him decapitated and ripped to pieces as everything explodes. The final loss for Lieutenant Jared in the counter. This is the end of him. And here's the counter of all the fights, guys. He didn't win a single battle, but managed to constantly take lives away from Camille nonetheless. That is his legacy, and in my opinion, a reflection of the Titans' legacy in general. A braggadocious murderer who added nothing to anything and only took from the people around him. Rip Bozo, you piece of shit. During the battle, Scirocco makes time to keep his bullshit up as he and Rekoa head out in the O and the Palace Athene, respectively. Camille and Emma are all fucked up in the head from what just happened, but Camille does manage to shake Emma out of it. Even so, Camille, during the course of the conversation, actually opens his visor in a vacuum. It goes without saying that everyone's sanity is on the low end. Camille hands the damaged Mark II to Fa in her Methus to take back to the Argama for repairs, and then heads back into the fray. At this point, they send out the bazooka launcher to Char to try to make a big difference in this fight. It's at this point that Haman enters the Cubile and deploys all the Gaza Seas she has. Their target is the Jupitris, but Scirocco and Rekoa are already there. Char also fires the Mega Launcher, taking out a massive amount of the Gaza Seas. At this point, a battle royale is starting. Everyone fights everyone. Haman goes after Char. Yazan goes after Camille. While he fights Rekoa already, Scirocco goes after Char too. Camille gets trapped by Rekoa and Yazan, but the Mark II has some haphazard repairs done on it, is back in the fight again, and is on a base jabber since the backpack is damaged. We finally see Rekoa confronted by Emma, and the girls go at it. Catfight, however, the battle is very short. Emma gives Rekoa a piece of her mind because, again, what Rekoa is using as an excuse here is fucking bullshit. So as Rekoa goes into close quarters combat, she laments being used like a tool, blames it on men, because how dare she take responsibility, and then the damage from the Mark II to her destroys the Palace Athene. But at this point, the Mark II is ridiculously heavily damaged, too much to continue. So Emma moves to get out of the mobile suit. But Yazan takes a cheap shot to hit the remains of the Palace Athene, sending Emma flying away. At this point, Camille loses it. The biosensor inside the suit starts to glow, and this is the part of the suit I didn't go in more in depth when I broke down the Zeta. The biosensor isn't just for piloting ease. It feeds off the psychic energy of the new type and channels those energies into the suit. The energy of the soul. Camille sends up what is called a psycho field, and Yazan cannot damage him. He tries to run away, and Camille calls him an animal in human form. He channels this power that he has into the beam saber of the Zeta, and brings a massive beam sword crashing down on Yazan, cutting off a third of his mobile suit and destroying it. However, the damage has been done. Camille manages to find Emma, but shockwaves at that range do substantial damage to the human body. Keep in mind, something similar happened to Franklin Bidon earlier in the show. Camille takes Emma into the remains of a ship, asking for her to hang on. The two of them talk, with Camille wanting to head to the Argama when things calm down to try to get her some help. Emma knows the truth, though. She's dying, and when she goes, she wants Camille to use her spirit to win the battle. It's her last gift to Camille, and as she dies, she reminds Camille he's never truly going to be alone. Fuck, I need a minute. Okay, I think I'm okay. Okay is something I can work with. I think I need to explain what's going on here. See, part of new types is that they don't really spell this out in that they're somehow able to remain conscious past the point of death. Think of like Force Ghosts from Star Wars. These spirits can still communicate with the living, which is likely what Camille has been sensing this whole time. It's how Sarah Zabirov was able to protect Kots, so on and so forth. The soul is basically the core of new type power, and the biosensor can pick up on these energies and channel them, making the Zeta ridiculously powerful, as we saw. And other new type spirits can actually aid in this. The battle continues with the AEUG forces still in the thick of it. Fa believes she heard Camille's voice and heads out in his direction. At this point, the AEUG are going to use the colony laser to take out a chunk of the enemy forces. The problem is they can't contact Gryps 2, so they start moving the Argama closer and contact Camille to protect the laser since they detect 3 mobile suits around it. Scirocco, Haman, and Char are still fighting. They fly into the colony laser and Scirocco starts trying to destroy it. Now the O manages to ambush Char and Haman joins in on the battle, lopping off one of the Hyakushiki's arms, then blasting off one of its legs. Camille leaves Emma in her resting place and heads back into the battle. Char's abandoned the Hyakushiki at this point and has headed into the residential district of Gryps 2. The Argama starts taking bad hits, but they stick with it. In a weird turn of events, Haman corners Char in a theater, and Scirocco joins in. Now, something Scirocco says is interesting here. Char wants to bend the world to his will. Keep that in mind for the future. Haman at this point makes an offer to Char to do exactly that. Join Axis again, restore the zombies, reshape the world together. Char's concern, though, is that he just wants to steer things in the right direction. He's confident that humanity's going to keep awakening into new types, and he's become willing to wait for that. Not something that Haman is in the favor of, but it would repeat the same mistakes again if she just keeps going down this path. At this point, Camille enters the theater to back Char up. Then, Char and Haman sense an odd pressure coming from Camille, who then opens fire on Haman and Scirocco, causing them to take cover. At this point, he finally shows his hand. Paptimus isn't this fucking humble anything. He thinks he's a genius, and that he's the one meant to steer the world. Fa then joins in, providing more covering fire so that the 3 AEUG members can flee. The colony laser is at 30%, which is enough to fire. Char gets back in his suit and tries to run, but Haman is on his heels. Well, heel. Camille tells Char to get out of there, and that he'll handle Paptimus, and then Bright delays firing the laser so that they don't hit the AEUG suits. Because of this, the Argama takes more damage, and they're losing people left and right. The fight stays intense with Haman putting Camille on the back foot, but Fa backs him up so that they can flee. Char then tells Camille to move it, and the two argue over fleeing, with Char flat out just saying, the old generation cannot build a new era. Camille has to survive. They get clear, and the colony laser fires. In one shot, the Titan's fleet is destroyed. We find out that Haman had ordered most of her fleet not to join her in the battle, which was wise, but this whole thing is a massive blow. The Titans, for better or worse, are toast. Char keeps trying to find Haman, but he doesn't have a whole lot to work with. He tries to outmaneuver Haman, thinking she can't use the bits from the Cubile in tight spaces, and he's wrong. Char notices, though, that there is a weakness in the wrecked ship that they're fighting in. It's an exposed core. At this moment, Char hits it with the Hyakushiki's Vulcans, and debris then hits his suit. The ship explodes, but Haman is able to get clear. At this point, she laments the possible loss of Char, wishing that they had had the chance to join together. Now, the last thing to see in the final battle is the final fight between Paptimus and Camille. Camille corners him in space, forcing him into a one-on-one battle for the first time in the series. Usually what happens is that Paptimus only fights when he has an advantage. At this point, Camille begins to beckon his friends and his loved ones to aid him. The souls of those that he's done battle with and alloyed with start to come to his aid. Sarah's soul tries to convince Camille not to fight Paptimus, but Kots manages to get through to her and let her understand that if this continues on, Paptimus is just going to start this whole thing all over again. At this point, the Zeta starts taking the power of all of these souls and channel it. For Lieutenant Emma, Rosamia, Sarah, Kots, and more are all there with him. Like Emma promised, he's never alone. Camille rushes the O, carves off one of the beam sabers on the subarms, and then moves into Wave Rider mode, and then performs one of the most iconic attacks in all of Gundam. This is the Wave Rider charge. Now, because of the psychic pressure of all these souls, Paptimus cannot get the O to move, and then Camille does a bonsai charge, crashing the nose of the Wave Rider into Scirocco, crushing his ribs, and basically cutting him in half. However, Scirocco has one last gamble. He projects his own new type pressure back into the Zeta. One last dirty trick. At this point, the Jupitrus, which they had crashed into, begins to explode, which was the last battlecruiser of the Titans. Camille is picked up by Fa, and we see something terrible. Camille's mind has regressed to that of a child. He's even trying to find a way to get out of the Zeta, and without his helmet, which would kill him. Fa then calls out to the Argama, and carries the Zeta back to it. They're picked up, and the Argama leaves the area. The war is over. We see the wreckage of the Hyakushiki, meaning that Char Aznable still lives. For all intents and purpose, the Gryps War has concluded with the AEUG defeating both Axis Zeon and the Titans, but it's a Pyrrhic victory. During this process, we lost so many friends, taken from us by a gang of murderers pretending to be a special operations group. Zeta Gundam ends with a reminder to all of us. Sometimes battles must be fought. You have to stand up to evil. But the cost of war is always the same. Lives will be lost, blood will be shed, and in the case of Camille Bidan, it will shatter the mind. Next time on Gundam Explained.
What happened? Someone set up us the bomb. We get signal. What? Main screen turn on. It's you.
How are you, gentlemen? All your bays are belong to us. You are on the way to destruction.
What you say?
You have no chance to survive, mate, your time. Ha ha ha.